Jennifer Colpea is the current CNAS Scholars Coordinator in the College of Natural and Agricultural Sciences at the University of California, Riverside. This role as an academic program coordinator includes managing the year-long enrollment of approximately 1,500 students in academic learning communities, coordinating about 60 first-year seminars, staff supervision, supervising over 35 student employees across 5 job descriptions, assisting with new student orientations, serving as staff liaison to a 50-plus member student volunteer program in the college, and serving on a variety of in-house and campus committees. Jennifer's 13 years working in higher education also include experience in academic advising, developing peer programs, creating workshops, and overseeing undergraduate research programs. Jennifer earned a BA in liberal studies with a minor in music, MA in teaching, and an EDS in curriculum and instruction. Jennifer also has certificates in advanced teaching English as a second language, data, building core supervisory competencies, and professional academic advising. Through those attainments, Jennifer has had the opportunity to teach undergraduate, graduate, and adult English as a second language learners. Having spent most of her time in higher education working with first-year freshman students, Jennifer has developed a passion for seeking out professional development conferences, webinars, articles, and books, and over the past few years has presented at multiple conferences on the differences in working with Gen Z students in higher education. Constant learning and professional development is not new to Jennifer. It's honestly a passion and love working in higher education and seeing the difference in the students from the time she first works with them at orientation, in a first-year seminar, or as a student employee, and sees them succeed to graduation and ultimately fulfilling their lifelong career goals. Jennifer, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you.
Well, delighted to get the opportunity to chat to you, Jennifer. And Matt has outlined, your bio there. We can hear you are very accomplished, and certainly your role at the moment, you juggle a lot. I suppose one of the things we like to do is get to know guests and give listeners the opportunity to get to know you a little bit. We heard in your bio about your passion for working with students. Can you talk to us a little bit about your route into higher ed? Was it an area that you'd always wanted to work in, or something you kind of stumbled into?
I would say working with students is something I've always been passionate about. During my college years, I spent 3 summers working at a summer camp. Growing up, K-12, I had 3 different jobs where I was a TA for different grades. So a lot of the work experience I had as part-time jobs and summer jobs were around younger students. So I went to college to get my degree in elementary education. When I graduated, it was the lovely recession and there were no teaching jobs available. And the few that were, people were getting pink slipped like left and right. So it wasn't comforting to go into that field at that time. So I tried to figure out what else I could do with my degree in education and happened upon a role as an academic advisor and basically loved it. Ended up moving up to assistant director, associate director for that department for about 5 years. And then I took a job at UC Riverside as an academic advisor and have since moved to assistant program coordinator and now program coordinator that I currently have. So even though I've had the opportunity to go back to elementary education, I've found that I'm really passionate now about working with college students and just kind of seeing their journeys. And so that's kind of where I am right now.
Yeah, it almost seems like if that first part had worked out and let's say there wasn't the recession and you went to teaching, like you'd still be helping students no matter what age they are and helping them along their journey. But it's always kind of, our success isn't that straight line. It's always, we're going in circles and that arrow goes everywhere. And then, now you found yourself at UCR. So for those that may not know much about UCR, maybe they know that it's part of the University of California system, but how would you describe UCR?
So I would say UCR, it's definitely the most diverse university in the UC system. We have about 25,000 students. And that's even grown a few thousand since I started a few years ago. Our population is almost 60% first generation and low socioeconomic status students. We are HSI, or Hispanic Serving Institution, with our next largest racial group as Asians. And then after that would be white, Black, 2 or more races. So we are a very, very diverse campus. What's great about it are not just the different diversity offices that are available to students, like the Women's Center, Chicano Center, LGBT Center, but it is a university that's very caring for their students. We know most of our student population, about 90% of them come from California, particularly Inland Empire. And so we get a lot of local students that are coming in. They just opened a medical school a few years ago, so we're definitely growing and trying to keep healthcare in the Inland Empire and not having our students leave to go to bigger schools like UCLA or UC San Diego. So it's definitely a great university. It's local. It's been a part of the system for several decades now, but I could say that the one thing that's probably the most distinctive is how diverse our student population is.
Yeah, I was reading a little bit, I suppose, in preparation for the interview, and obviously a bit around the CNAS Scholars Program. And for listeners who aren't so familiar, can you talk to us a little bit about that, what exactly it is?
Sure. Yeah, so the CNAS Scholars Program started out with just learning communities back in 2007, before I even started at the campus. And basically the idea of these learning communities is they're getting 24 students of similar majors, similar math placements, and they put them in cohorts where they take their math and science classes together. So that includes lectures, labs, discussions. They also have supplemental instruction or peer tutoring that they attend as part of that, as well as first-year seminars that they take in the fall. So the unique thing is that a lot of our classes, I'm sure like a lot of large public institutions, could have 300, 400, 500 students in those classes, but when they go to discussion or lab, it's the same 24 students they're getting to see. So it's a lot of contact hours that they're getting, and it's the same group that they're with from fall to winter to spring quarter. And so they're kind of forced into this group of students, and sometimes they're a little bit hesitant about it, but usually they're really appreciative because we create these schedules for the students so they don't have to stress about finding classes. I know as first year students, that's usually a big stressor is when it comes time for registration, scrambling to find classes. So because these classes are pre-scheduled for them, that takes away one of the stressors for them. It also gives them a unique group of students that because they're taking the same lectures, labs, discussions, that they get to know each other a little bit better. They tend to form friendships, and oftentimes will even stay friends and take the same classes together sophomore, junior, and senior year. So it's really fun being able to see them grow. A lot of them have now turned into student employees that I oversee as well. So it's really fun seeing how they started out their first year all the way up until, they're working for us and then going into graduation, grad school, other job opportunities that they have.
So it's almost like it goes full circle for a lot of those students. And especially that registration part. Yeah, it's like a lot of institutions, usually the first year students are registering last. It's usually like the hierarchy, seniors, juniors, sophomores in the first year. So to know that it's like, well, you can get a lot of these classes no matter what, or probably a good chance of getting it. That's a very good selling point. But how have things been, because was UCR remote, and is UCR still remote right now, or doing a virtual environment?
Yes. So we went remote last March. Basically, we're told like 2 days before that we were going to be closed just for a couple of weeks. That's all we were told, just a couple of weeks, not a big deal, which turned into a month, turned into a quarter. Now it's, over a year later, we're still remote. There are talks to have classes in the fall on campus. So it's roughly about 75 to 80% of the classes will be meeting in person, with a lot of the larger lectures though are going to be virtual, but students can still go to discussions or labs in person. So we know that students will be on campus. We know faculty will be teaching on campus. I think what's still up in the air maybe is staffing and what that kind of looks like for different centers around the campus. We're not quite sure what that looks like yet. And of course, this is all assuming everything stays safe and we have boundaries and, COVID doesn't spike again in the US. But that's kind of the plan, to kind of have like a hybrid approach in the fall.
Yeah, so I guess how is that with the learning community? As if you were, since you were pretty much virtual for this last year and even into now, how's that impacted your learning community? And then I guess even looking forward to fall, where it's like everything's kind of still up in the air, but there's kind of they're leaning towards maybe coming back in fall, maybe 75, 80%. How does that impact? Like, well, how do you even plan for that in the fall?
Well, with all of the classes, we've already created all of these schedules. We actually create the schedules in March for fall quarter. And so we do planning quite ahead of time. And some of our lectures have already decided they're going to be virtual, but like I said, discussions and labs planning on being in person. Kind of what the campus is still trying to figure out is if a student goes to a lab in person and then 10 minutes later they're supposed to be in a virtual lab or virtual class, where are they going to go on campus for that, right? We still have to social distance, and so trying to find places for them and places not just outside, because if it's hot, if it's windy, if it's raining, right, and the weather you have to consider. So still trying to figure out the logistics, I think, of what this hybrid approach looks like. I know, at least for example, for our first year seminars, there's a faculty portion and the staff portion. So for faculty, we are letting them choose if they want to teach that in person or virtually. For the staffing portion of our seminars, we already decided about a month ago that we were going to keep those virtual regardless of what happens, mainly because we have like one little room in our building that can hold these classes, and it's just not feasible to have hundreds of these students going in and out of a single room and time to clean in between. And so to help put the staff mind at ease about stressing about what to do, we already decided that they're just going to do it remote. We did it remote last fall because we were all kind of forced into that, so everyone's comfortable with it. We're not even changing the textbook. We don't want to change it too much for people because we know there's already going to be other adjustments that are happening. But yeah, we're definitely trying to get creative with the way that we're helping these students create a sense of community. Definitely something that's been a challenge for some of them this year, right? So, and they get to see each other on Zoom, but it's not quite the same thing when you get to walk to class together and you get to have some of those talks that you normally would, as opposed to Zoom, basically just kind of left up to chatting with people, and that's about it.
Yeah, it's certainly going to be interesting, I think, for all of us. We've been talking with guests previously about trying to organize orientation, and you'll have second year students who maybe weren't on campus and trying to orientate them, and your first years. We're all going to have to get very creative, I think. And and speaking of creative, in terms of your own role, like you juggle quite a bit, and you supervise, I think, staff and students. Can you talk a little bit about that, maybe, and your approach to that, and how that's worked over the last year?
Sure. In my supervision roles, I have one staff member that I supervise. And originally, we only had one student assistant, but in the past 4 years, we've now created job opportunities for close to 40 student employees. A few of those are volunteer, but most of them are actually paid positions. So one thing that I had piloted at the early start of last year, before we knew this was all going to happen, was starting up a peer advisor and a peer academic leader positions. We already had peer mentors that I started up a few years ago, but found how valuable it was to have these students to be able to communicate with students in the program, to help facilitate our first year seminars, to meet with these students, one-on-one settings, offer workshops. Previously, with just 2 staff members in the with the Learning Community program, when I started, we only had 600 students in the program. Since then, we've grown to 1,500 students. And so even with 600 students, 2 staff members, it's not a great ratio, right? And trying to network with people. And so that's why we created these peer programs. That way, this coming fall, we'll actually have at least one peer in every single first year seminar. So we're really excited about that. And they're going to be co-teaching with either a program coordinator or an academic advisor. So it gives them a lot of professional development opportunities in a virtual setting. It's interesting. We did a lot of our interviews last year in February, and by the time we hired them in March, getting ready for training in April, we were all virtual. So we definitely had to shift everything we were doing to that virtual, just like everyone else had to. But we have found that there's been a few, I think, benefits from it, mainly that we've been able to offer other workshops that we normally wouldn't have recorded. Now we can record those workshops, post them to the website so students can watch them on their own time. We have virtual drop-in peer advising. And so students can pop in, ask a quick question. And we know, especially with registration, academic advisors get swamped with emails. And sometimes students want their response right away. So the peer advisors can help offer general assistance. They don't go anything too specific about degree requirements, but a lot of the first year students, the questions are a little bit more basic with advising. And so the peer advisors are a great resource for those students, and we have those available to them every quarter. And so that's a program we're also expanding in the fall as well, as a way to meet students. Even once we do go back in person fully, we have already talked to our students. They still like the idea that we might have a few hours in person and a few hours virtual. So for students who can't make it to the building at a certain time, or maybe they're away from campus, but they want to ask a quick question, that still be an option for them. So we're definitely trying to rethink how we're going to do things in the future. And I said, one of those is like recording the workshops is something we're going to keep doing, offering these virtual hours to students just to be more accessible to them.
And I like the fact that you have like the peer in the first year seminar classes with the instructor. So yeah, they can co-teach, get that experience, but then the students in the class can have that peer that they can connect with and know like this person, they've been being a student, so they probably have a lot of experience they can talk about, share, and then also answer some of those more basic questions for students. And with the peers, has that been something that has been going on for a few years, having them as part of the first year seminar?
Right. So I created a proposal back in 2015 to the director of the department, who thought it was going to be a great program. She kind of moved it up to the chain to get funding approved. And so in fall of 2016, we hired 8 peer mentors. And their job was basically they each had a caseload of 20 to 30 students. And these are students who opt into the program. And then they would teach a first year seminar and then present workshops. The first year we started the program, we had 40 students sign up. So not a huge number. We did the most marketing we've ever done that first year and still only had about 40. By the second year, we did less marketing, had about 150. Third year and beyond, it's been over 300 students, sometimes 350, 400 that are signing up. And we do cap it at 250. So as we market it as the first 250 to sign up, get to work with the peer mentor. But because we wanted to make sure that students also could reach out to other students besides those peer mentors, is why I created the peer advising program and the peer academic leader program last year. So the peer advising, that's our volunteer program, but it's great for students who, like we have some first year students that are going to be doing that. So they'll be sophomores this next year. And it gives them an opportunity to build up their resume because sometimes they have a lot of ambition, but just not a lot of experience. So being in the volunteer role basically will kind of guarantee that they'll either get a role as a peer mentor or peer academic leader the following year. They're kind of prime running in those spots. They also get to host a social event. So that was actually created by our peer advisors this year. They do 1 or 2 socials each quarter, and they're virtual. They play games. There's no staff that attend. It's just student to student bonding, basically. So a way just for them to get to know other students and hang out, have some fun. Even though it's all on Zoom right now, we're still going to continue these as well once we're back on campus. The peer academic leaders, these are positions that are for more experienced students, I would say, especially students that have had like tutoring experience. Maybe they've been a supplemental instruction leader. They've done presentations of some sort, because these are students who are paired together and they don't teach with any staff. So they're co-teaching their first year seminar together. And we've piloted it this past fall with just 2 sets of PALs, and now we're going to have 4 sets. We'll have 8 of them this next coming fall, but heard great reviews from the students that were in those classes, and the peer academic leaders that were teaching them loved it. And we have a couple that are returning this next year as well. So we're super excited to have so many peers working with us.
I think the fact that you constantly endeavor to enhance, improve, and expand programs is really admirable. And I saw mention, I think, on the website around the expansion of the program into a sophomore program known as Persist. Can you tell me a little bit about that, I suppose, how that came about? Was that something that you noticed that there was kind of a need for it and therefore it grew to kind of fill the gap?
So that program is actually a grant-funded program from the National Science Foundation. It was actually co-written by a couple of faculty. One of them that used to work with our advising center, still works on campus, but now he's the chair of a different department. And another faculty member in a different department. So basically they wrote a program for sophomore students and got the proposal. It was like a 3-page proposal. They handed it to me and said, okay, we need to create a program. So with that, the only guidelines that were really in there was they wanted to target students who traditionally have a harder time graduating within 4 years. And so that was our students who placed into pre-calculus. And it had to include students who were either first generation and or low income. So that was part of the criteria, and making sure that that population was eligible for that particular grant that they were going to be getting, because in that program, they get paid $1,500 per quarter, and they have to actually agree to not work. And the reason they came up with that number is because They're worried that students who tend to start in lower level math classes takes a little bit longer to get to their science courses, get more engaged, with the faculty, and if they come from some type of disadvantaged background, it's just like the odds are stacking up. And then these are the students who will tend to sacrifice academics to work. And so it's giving them the $1,500 is about how much they would make if they were working a part-time job. So within that, they usually take a research seminar once or twice a year, depending on the year. We've had it offered a couple times. Some years we've had it offered once. We also partner with Keck Graduate Institute. So they've been very gracious in doing virtual field trips for us. We usually do 2 field trips, one in the fall and one in the spring, just so students can see different industry-related jobs, research-related jobs. That institute's located in Claremont, so it's not too far away. We usually would rent a van, pack up the students on the Saturday, drive over there, and their faculty are great and wonderful, and they come on the Saturday to meet with our group of 12 students. There's only 12 of them in the program. We also have a couple peer mentors that attend as well. And so the students in the program work with their peer mentors bi-weekly on a set of topics. And all of those topics are related to things that are going to help them professionally. So they talk about resumes and cover letters and a 30-second pitch, doing presentations. Sometimes they're scared about doing presentations. They also attend a career fair that's targeted towards sophomore students. And then we partner with the Career Center on that. And then the big end of their program is they get into our summer research program. It's called the Research in Science and Engineering, or RISE program. So in that program, they're paid $5,000 to do 10 weeks of research. Then they get to present that research at the end at a symposium where all the students in the program are eligible to attend and listen to one another's presentations. So it's been a great program. It's a 5-year grant, so it actually is coming up on an end this coming summer. We would love to continue it, but with paying $9,500 per student, I know that I'm sure like a lot of other institutions, there's some budget cuts going around. So we can't financially afford to keep that program, but we're definitely trying to think of ways we could keep elements from it, like the mentoring portion, expanding the sophomore program to more than just 12 students, I think would be a great thing for our students, because typically, if students don't leave their first year, their second most likely is going to leave their sophomore year. So definitely trying to keep them engaged. We have so much programming now for our first year students, which is great, but definitely don't want to forget about the sophomore students.
Yeah, that sounds like a fantastic program. I hope it's something where you can get more funding for it, for that to continue. And just like you mentioned, there's a lot of institutions, there's a lot of programming, a lot of funds that go to the first years, and a lot of attention also goes to those that are in their senior year or maybe excessive unit that they want to try to graduate as soon as possible. But it's always in the middle, like the sophomore juniors, where it's like, where's the stuff for them? And so this seems like a really great program for the sophomores. So hopefully it is something that can continue and get more students in it. Now, Colin kind of referenced this earlier where he was saying that, with being remote and potentially coming back in fall, you have the incoming cohort of students that are going to be starting in fall. You have the students that started last year, but their only experience to UCR or to their institution is online learning. And so if let's say you are on campus for fall, that's their first time stepping on the campus. So it's like they're technically a continuing student, but they're new to the campus. I guess my question would be, like, for you, like, what are your thoughts as like a program coordinator and engaging students? How do you think that will work with maybe those continuing students that are coming to campus for the first time?
Yeah, and that's definitely something we are brainstorming on how to reach out to these students, because even though they wouldn't be in the learning community program anymore, because we don't have that program for sophomore students, definitely trying to help them feel engaged and connected to campus. When I was teaching first year seminars in the fall, that was one of the questions I was getting a lot. And a lot of concerns from students was, I don't want to feel like I'm a first year student, but I'm going to kind of be a first year student in terms of being officially on campus and just being able to meet people face to face as opposed to seeing everyone on Zoom. And so we're definitely trying to brainstorm ways that we can get these students connected. An example of one thing we've already done a couple weeks ago, some of our peer mentors presented on a successful sophomore skills workshop, where basically it's offered to first year students, and it talks to them about different housing options, because for them, they didn't know that was something that existed, right? Last year, we hardly had anyone in our res halls. And so they talk about budgeting, they talk about academics, because this will also be the first time that these students are going to have to register on their own, and they won't have that nice, perfect schedule that's handed to them every quarter. And in that workshop, we also added a few slides that talk about the return to campus and kind of like an FAQ guide of what you need to know once you're there. But we're definitely brainstorming how we can use some of our peers even once we are back on campus, just to kind of be out and be present, especially those first few days where everyone's kind of nervous or not sure where to go. I'm sure the campus is thinking about this too, but specifically for our CNAS students in our college, we're trying to figure out what are some ways that we can connect with them. We know that staffing, like I said, still kind of up in the air of what that's going to look like, but we definitely have enough peers that we could probably rotate them in, social distancing, just to be able to help give, some guidance to students who might be lost or not sure where to go. So that's definitely a project we're going to be working on this summer, is kind of figuring out what we can do for our sophomore students who technically it's like their first year, in terms of being on campus. But want to make sure that they feel warm and welcome and that they're not too nervous, hopefully get rid of some of those jitters that they might have.
Well, it's great to hear that, the planning is ongoing, and you recognize that it is something that will need particular management, I suppose. And I think one of the areas that might be of great benefit is, as Matt mentioned in your bio, you have presented around kind of Gen Z. And for listeners who, are interested in that topic, or maybe know a little bit, but not a huge amount, can you maybe talk to us a little bit about maybe some of the Gen Z characteristics and in terms then of kind of reaching out to them, how you go about it?
Sure. Yeah. So I became interested in this topic a few years ago, obviously, as the Gen Z started coming into college, right? Because for years and years, it was just to talk about millennials and how to work with millennial students. But then we have this new population, Gen Z, because most of the students at UCR, the first year students, are most of the time traditional going students, meaning they come straight from high school. We do have a transfer population, but in the first year population, I'd say 90% or more of our students come straight out of high school. And so it's definitely the Gen Z population. It's just roughly like 1995 to around 2010, 2012. And the ages kind of differ depending on which source you're looking at. But they're a very tech-oriented generation. There's quotes where they talk about them having 5 or 6 screens at a time, which is probably pretty easy, right? If you have a couple screens for your computer, you have a smartwatch, you have a tablet, you have a cell phone, right? So they're very tech savvy. They're kind of born and raised with it ever since they're babies. They've been given this technology. But the biggest difference with this generation from any other generation is probably the mental health. And I think that became a lot more prevalent because of COVID. Prior to COVID, around 20% of students have reported having some type of mental health, biggest one being anxiety and depression. Unfortunately, that has led to more suicides in this generation than any other generation before. And of course, COVID just made it worse. It went from about 20% to about 80% of students suffering with some type of form of depression or anxiety. So before COVID even happened, we had already talked about including a topic on mental health in our first year seminar. And we got that from our 2019 cohort, where we basically sent them a whole list of topics and said, if you had to pick 10 topics, what would be your top 10? And mental health was something we've never talked about previously, but that 2019 population kind of gave us a red flag that this was something we needed to include. So we were already in talks of doing something about it in early 2020. And I guess just with timing, it actually worked out because we were really happy that we actually had that topic in the fall for our student population, just because, everything they thought was going to happen with college, the first year, getting to meet people in res halls, getting connected to campus just wasn't happening for them. So that was definitely, it's been an ongoing topic, but we're happy that we included that. And like I said, even before this whole COVID thing happened, but that's probably the biggest difference for that generation. But I mean, it's a generation that's dealt with a lot of highs and lows, so that you don't consider them as idealistic, I guess, as the millennial generation, right? They tend to have what they would call co-pilot parents instead of helicopter parents. So with our millennial generation, kind of like, you always felt like the parents were hovering, right? But for the Gen Z population, they see it more as their parents are kind of their friends, right? They want to bring them with them. They don't want their parents necessarily doing things for them, but they want them included, right? Which is why we also see a lot of them either live at home while they're in college, or if they finish college, they go back and live at home, maybe for a few more years until they branch out and, and get roommates or get married. So they're very tight with their parents, unlike, I'd say, millennial generation, a little bit more detached from them because they felt like their parents maybe were kind of hovering a little bit too much. But in terms of going to college, in terms of getting a degree and getting a job, they definitely are a very entrepreneurial generation, right? So we've probably seen a lot of these, right? All the tech startups tend to be a lot of, like 20-somethings, that Gen Z population. So they are interested in working, but a lot of them want to work for themselves, right? So hence Uber and Lyft and DoorDash and Etsy and all these different sites where people are kind of creating their own work as opposed to going to work for specific, like going to work at the mall or going to work for fast food. They want to create something that they're passionate about. And then as far as, because they've been around tech so much, that tends to be a popular career choice for them. So like computer science, data science, engineering, that's like one of their top choices. Business is another one, which is not surprising because, again, they're people who want to make money, right? So we've heard of the influencers. A lot of them see that as a profession, right? At least while they're younger, where they can make money kind of helping to promote certain brands and they're getting free things or getting paid on the side for it. So it's definitely a very different generation than the millennials, even though they're just a few years apart. But yeah, I've presented several times at different conferences, and those are just like a few highlights, I guess, of that generation.
Yeah. Yeah, it's funny that you say that in terms of like millennials and Gen Z, just a few years apart, but like so different in a sense, with Gen Z just pretty much growing up on technology and all its changes. I mean, I'm considered a millennial, but like an older millennial. I mean, I didn't have a cell phone until I was in college. So, I was using pay phones, and now those don't really exist anymore. But are there any misconceptions that you think people have about Gen Z students?
Yes. So I think the biggest misconception is that people think because they love technology, that that's how they always want to communicate. But surprisingly, even though they love their technology, their number one form of communication is in person or face-to-face. So I realize with COVID, we haven't really had the option to necessarily do face-to-face right now, but that's the one thing that students are saying in the Gen Z population when they've been surveyed. And this is a lot of different articles and books that are out there. They're all saying that's the number one type of communication they prefer, which I think surprises a lot of people because we all assume, well, if they're so tech savvy, then they must just want to do everything on the phone or on a computer, but that's not the case. So that's good for support staff, right, on colleges. That means students do want to see us. They don't want to just read about it on a website. But that's definitely like the number one thing that people are misinformed about, I think, with this generation.
Yeah, I think that's really true, and we've definitely seen that kind of come through over the last few years. That it's not necessarily, you hear a lot that the students don't read emails, but they kind of want a bit more. It's not just the email, and I suppose in terms of programming in particular that you've done, if there are listeners there who are hearing you and you do have expertise in the area, and they're saying, okay, what are the things that I can do facing into the new academic year and the Gen Z students, are there any particular bits of advice that you would say for listeners, advisors, in terms of reaching out to that cohort?
So reaching out to them on as many platforms as possible. So we email students. We have a learning management system. We use iLearn, but we're going to be switching to Canvas pretty soon. But adding to our website, making sure that's current, that's up to date, because students, the moment they find a link or something like a picture that's dated from 2010, they no longer trust what they're seeing online, which is why a lot of them want to come face to face. But just trying to reach out to students on as many platforms as possible. So for CNAS scholars, we have a blog that gets updated twice a month. We have our website that we maintain, make sure that that's updated. We use our iLearn, our LMS. Email messaging mainly to promote workshops or to tell them about enrollment. But then we also have an Instagram account that was staff run initially, but now it's student run, and the traffic has actually picked up a lot more when it's been student run. And what was nice in the past was sometimes when we've had our students running it, if they were going, if someone just went to NYU to go check out the campus, because that's where they're going to be going after they graduate. And so they did like a little Instagram takeover. And so kind of makes it a little bit more real, makes it more user-friendly. They don't want to hear from millennials. They want to hear from other Gen Zers. And so that's why we have those students using it. And then part of the reason we created so many peer positions is because we wanted to give students that face-to-face contact. Initially, when I started, it was fine having 2 staff members sending out an occasional email. But because we have a lot of different platforms that we can reach out to students on, they're getting the messaging, right? Like I said, with our peer mentor program, starting out with 40 students one year when it's opt-in, to now we have 350 to 400 that are opting into it. That's definitely, hopefully, good word of mouth that they're spreading, that they're encouraging others to do it. But including all these peers is a way to provide some of that face-to-face contact, because the budget for staffing is still at 2 for our program, which is not a lot of people for 1,500 students. And so using something like peers is a great way to provide some of that face-to-face. And I said, one of the programs, the peer advisors, they are strictly volunteers, and we still have just as many people applying for that position as we do for our paid position. So students themselves are still seeking out those opportunities and that experience. And then it helps us because they can reach out to more students than just 2 staff members are able to do on their own.
Yeah, it's a great point to put all that information in as many places as possible. I mean, because of course, like email or on the website, consider more of the official kind of way to inform students. But if they're not on the website or they miss that email because they get so many other emails, having social media, a blog, something like that is great. But I can imagine someone listening going like, that's great, but how do I ensure that I cover all those bases? Like, so like with your peers, do you have like someone, like a certain peer that's assigned to like IG or Instagram and someone that's assigned to the blog? And then how do you make sure that like everything's accurate?
Yes. And so we actually do have our peer mentors. Each of them have like a special project that they can sign up for at the beginning of the year. And that's kind of their project for the entire year. So yes, we have one person that their sole job is posting to our Instagram account. We have 2 peer mentors who work on our blog. So I usually send them a topic, and they're the one who they create it themselves. So usually one of them will write it, the other one edits. And I will read it once it's been created already. We have 2 peer mentors who actually create a newsletter that goes out to students once a month. And that newsletter will highlight like registration dates, upcoming workshops, and usually like one campus department of the month. That's also student run. So again, the students, I give them the topics, they create the newsletter, send it to me. I kind of edit it as needed and then send that out. For the website, my fellow coordinator works with a couple of the peer mentors, and they will take a look at the website and then give any needed updates to it. They usually work with him on it. So even though he's the one doing the actual updates, we'll have students at least do some of the checking and reading through, making sure it sounds user-friendly, right? Because we want to make sure it's not going to be too confusing for students, because there's no point in having the website if it's lingo that the students don't understand. So we want to make sure that everything that we do is, for the students, created by students. Even our iLearn, our learning management system page, is edited by one of our student assistants, who's also our peer mentor. And so, yes, it doesn't have to just be one person that's doing all of the work. So even though myself and the other coordinator will do some of the editing on the back end of things, it's the students that are creating all of this content for us. And they've all been trained. They all are very professional. We've never had any issues. All of these things have been running now for a few years, and it's been a great way to reach out to students without, like I said, having to physically, try to market to things. And we offer all of these different services. That way students can kind of pick and choose the things that they feel would be most helpful for them. There is some overlap though. Like if we send out an email that talks about a workshop, we'll also post that on our iLearn page. And then we post like the recordings of the workshops as well on our website. So students can go multiple places to find this information. And just a way to reach out to them. But once it's been created, it's not too hard to maintain each of those things. It's pretty simple. We use things like Canva to create flyers, because Canva is free and it looks so much better than creating like a flyer in a Word document, right? So try to do things a little bit more creative. We have a student that peer mentor that does create our flyers for us. So again, I just give her the content and she creates this beautiful flyer that can get posted, on our Instagram page or posted on our LMS as needed.
I think you kind of hit on this earlier, but in terms of, and given we have an expert, one of the things that I've seen said, and I've seen, I suppose, anecdotally, is the desire amongst Gen Z for authenticity and a feeling that, they are universities or companies or whoever it is, they're selling them a product. A glossy brochure is lovely, but like, what's it really like? So does having kind of peer mentors, peer advisors produce the material for you? Does that help with that side of things? Would you say that is, I suppose, that is true about Gen Z, that there is that desire for authenticity?
Oh, definitely. That's definitely true for that population. So they are definitely more marketable if you're using real people to, influence them, right? That's why they want to be influencers, right? Because they can be, a sponsor for any particular product. I have a student that I've worked with a couple of years, and she liked a certain energy drink, and she reached out to that company, and that company said, hey, what if we give them to you? We'll pass these out to your friends, right? So students really love that authenticity, that peer-to-peer marketing, as opposed to some big corporation or some big celebrity or someone like that trying to get them to do or buy something. And so we really do kind of keep that model with our outreach to students. So even though the emails come from like a staff account, Instagram is controlled by the students. A blog, it's a student voice, right? So that's why we have the students write it as opposed to a staff member writing it. Our iLearn, it's a student editor that goes in and edits the content. So again, any of the messaging that goes out, it's written by students for students. And so they're going to use, hopefully terminology that they're all comfortable with, as opposed to things that, millennials or Gen X or baby boomers, other older generations maybe don't use those types of words. They can kind of create that context for those students and make it a little bit easier for them to understand things. A lot of them are just there 1 or 2 years ago themselves, and so they can definitely give better recommendations than, say, a staff member who, yes, maybe you've been to that department, but it's been a few months or it's been a couple of years. Whereas a student can market to other students. Even in our weekly meetings with our student employees, we usually give them time to basically PR or share any events or clubs that they're part of. If they're having any, like someone just had a virtual conference a couple of weeks ago, so they kept talking about that and trying to get them to include, their students and their mentees in that opportunity. And so we're definitely all about having students have that voice. I could tell you, even just comparing like Instagram posts, one from a staff member a few years ago that had like 5 likes on it. Then we had one where a student was giving final study tubes over the finals week in fall quarter, had like over 100 likes on it, right? So it's a huge difference from a staff member posting something about good luck on finals versus another student saying, I'm there with you, like good luck everyone. And so we really do get feedback from our student employees on ways to reach out to students as well. It's not me just reading a bunch of literature, like that's great, but it's also wonderful that we have this kind of nice little focus group that we get to talk to and kind of hear what their concerns are, hear what things they're excited about, some new ideas that they have.
Yeah. And even though as staff, yes, we've been college students before, we've gone through finals, but that was a while ago. It's so much different now with these students. So yeah, to have that pure voice, it's like they can tell oh, this is probably from someone that I know is a student and someone that is in the trenches with us and understands us versus someone that maybe is up on the lingo. But as we get towards the end of this interview, I want to kind of go back to the fact that, you have various degrees and certificates in education, more specifically within teaching. You've taught various courses through the years. Has your teaching impacted or influenced you when you are in academic advising or your role as a program coordinator?
Yeah, so NACADA has a little thing they say advising is teaching. And so definitely believe that that's true. All right, so even though I do have experience in teaching international students, I have experience teaching first-year students. My degree was teaching elementary students, all different ages of students. I think an important component of that is when you are teaching, you're teaching to a large group typically, right? You could have 20, 30 plus people in a room that you're teaching to and trying to make sure you're meeting everyone's needs kind of where they are, which can sometimes be challenging if you have certain topics you're trying to cover at the same time, trying to make everyone feel included. So advising is definitely an amazing opportunity. You have to do that one-on-one teaching with the student. So you can really cater your message, the information, what you want the student to really know, and giving them the opportunity to learn, not just telling them everything, but showing them where things are, right? So one nice thing I think with being virtual is that a lot of people are screen sharing, right? So you can screen share, the student can do it with you, or you can do it with the student. And previously, it was usually the advisor behind the desk, right, having to flip their screen around and say, okay, look at this. But now you can have a student screen share with you, and you can kind of walk them through, that question that they have. Instead of just saying, hey, here's a link, show them where they can find that on the website, right? That way they remember it, hopefully, for the next time that they have that same question, or maybe someone else they know has that question, they can show that person. And so I definitely think that advising it's a teaching role, a little bit different. You're just doing that more one-on-one personalized approach to it, but definitely something I think that overlaps with teaching. And definitely can see similarities with that. I work in an advising center where like 3/4 of the staff are academic advisors. And so it definitely helps to be able to work with them as well and share kind of tips on like best practices in teaching, but they also share tips with me, on being an advisor. And I've been an advisor in the past for a few different years in my work history. So definitely can see the parallels in that, but yeah, for sure, that one-on-one attention that you can give to that student when they're meeting with you is valuable time for them, as opposed to maybe a classroom where they don't necessarily always have that chance to get that one-on-one attention, which is great, like I said, for our Gen Z, because that's what they're really craving, right? Is that face-to-face time, and advisors are able to offer that.
You mentioned there in terms of sharing tips and best practice, and I think that's exactly what you have done today, Jennifer. So I want to thank you for kind of offering us insights into your program, and some of the ways in which you really have looked to enhance it and develop it as it's gone on. Some best practice approaches in terms of the Gen Z cohort. It's really been fascinating. So just thank you so much for taking the time to chat to Matt and myself today.
Thank you so much for having me. It was fun chatting with both of you.